A rush through the city, Rachel Montgomery checked her phone for the 5th time in 2 minutes. The screen glowed with Natalie's message, "Table reserved under Parker. Don't be late this time," she groaned, weaving through the crowded Chicago sidewalk. Her portfolio bag kept sliding off her shoulder. Her hair was escaping its neat bun after a brutal day of client presentations. The restaurant loomed ahead. All glass windows and golden lighting. The kind of place where entrees cost more than her weekly grocery budget. Natalie had insisted they celebrate landing the new campaign. But Rachel felt underdressed in her simple black dress and worn flats. The wrong table. The hostess barely glanced up as Rachel burst through the entrance. "Parker reservation," Rachel blurted out, already scanning the dining room. Before the hostess could respond, Rachel spotted a table by the window with 2 wine glasses already poured. That had to be it. She hurried across the polished floor, dodging waiters carrying elaborate dishes. Her bag caught on a chair, but she yanked it free without breaking stride. Finally reaching the table, she collapsed into the seat with an exhausted sigh. I know, I'm terrible with time." Rachel grabbed the wine glass and took a generous sip. "But you won't believe the day I had." The client wanted 17 revisions on a logo that was perfect to begin with. She paused to breathe, then looked up. The person across from her was definitely not Natalie. Meeting James Blackwood, the man sitting opposite, wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her rent. Dark hair swept back from a strong face, sharp jawline, and eyes so intensely blue they seemed to see right through her. He held his wine glass halfway to his lips, frozen in obvious surprise, but there was something else in his expression, amusement. Rachel's brain stuttered to a halt. Oh God. Oh no. I am so sorry. She started to stand, knocking her knee against the table. Wine sloshed dangerously in both glasses. I thought this was my friend's table. I'll just go find the right one. You already drank my wine, the man said. His voice was deep, smooth, with the slightest hint of humor. Seems only fair you stay and finish it. I really should go, Rachel insisted, feeling heat flood her cheeks. This was absolutely mortifying. My friend is waiting for me somewhere in this restaurant, and I've just crashed your dinner like some kind of disaster person. Sit down, he said softly. It wasn't aggressive or demanding. Something in his tone made her pause. Please. Against her better judgment, Rachel sat. An unexpected dinner waiter materialized instantly, placing her wine glass with a fresh one. The man across from her nodded his thanks, and the waiter disappeared as silently as he'd arrived. Rachel noticed how the staff seemed to orbit around their table with practiced precision. Whoever this man was, he commanded attention without saying a word. I'm James, he said, extending his hand across the table. Rachel shook it, feeling the warmth and strength of his grip. Rachel, and again, I'm really sorry about barging in like this. I tend to rush into things without looking properly, I noticed. James replied, and she caught the hint of a smile. It's refreshing, actually. Most people who sit at this table are very calculated about it. There was something in the way he said it that suggested a story, but Rachel didn't push. Instead, she found herself relaxing slightly. So were you waiting for someone? Or did I just ruin a nice quiet dinner alone? I was waiting for someone who isn't coming, James said, his expression darkening briefly before smoothing out again. A business associate who apparently had better plans. So you've actually improved my evening considerably. The waiter returned with menus, but James waved them away. We'll have the chef's tasting menu, and bring the 2015 Bordeaux. Rachel opened her mouth to protest that she couldn't afford any of this, but James fixed her with a look that stopped the words in her throat. My invitation? My expense? You've already committed to staying by drinking my wine, remember? Getting to know each other as courses began arriving, each more beautiful than the last. Rachel found herself talking more freely than she had with anyone in months. James asked questions about her work, her life, her dreams. He seemed genuinely interested in her stories about difficult clients and creative breakthroughs. So you design brands, James said, studying her over his wine glass. You help companies figure out who they want to be. More like who they actually are, Rachel corrected. A lot of times companies think they're one thing, but their real identity is something completely different. My job is finding that truth and making it visible. James leaned forward slightly. And what do you see when you look at people? Can you see their real identity too? The question caught Rachel off guard. She studied him carefully, noting the expensive suit, the confident posture, the way his hands rested calmly on the table despite their intense conversation. But there was something else. A guardedness in his eyes. A tension in his shoulders that suggested someone who'd learned not to trust easily. I think you're someone who's very good at controlling your environment, Rachel said slowly. Someone who doesn't like surprises or chaos. Which probably made my crashing your table either the best or worst thing that's happened to you today. James's expression shifted, surprise flickering across his features before he smiled. A real smile this time, one that transformed his entire face from coldly handsome to genuinely warm. You're perceptive. It's my job, Rachel replied. But she felt pleased by his reaction. The mystery deepens as dessert arrived. A delicate chocolate creation that looked too beautiful to eat. Rachel realized hours had passed. Her phone buzzed insistently in her purse, probably Natalie wondering where she'd disappeared to, but she ignored it. I should probably find my friend, Rachel said reluctantly. She's going to think I stood her up. Let me give you a ride home, James offered, already signaling for the check. That's really not necessary. I can catch the train. It's late, and I insist. There was that tone again. The one that made refusing seem impossible. Outside, a sleek black car waited at the curb. Not a taxi or rideshare, but a private vehicle, with a driver who opened the door the moment they approached. Rachel slid into leather seats softer than her couch at home. As the car pulled away from the restaurant, James turned to her. Thank you for tonight, Rachel. It was exactly what I needed. Thank you for not calling security when I invaded your table, Rachel joked, but her heart was beating faster than normal. I'd like to see you again, James said. If you're interested, Rachel hesitated. Everything about this evening felt surreal, like stepping into someone else's life for a few hours. But the connection she'd felt across that table was undeniable. I'd like that too. The unsettling realization, the car stopped in front of her apartment building. James walked her to the door, his presence somehow both comforting and intimidating in the quiet street. Good night, Rachel, he said softly, and the way he said her name sent shivers down her spine. Good night, James, she replied. It wasn't until she was inside her apartment, door locked behind her, that the strangeness of the evening hit her fully. She'd never told James her last name. She'd never given him her address. Yet somehow, he'd known exactly where she lived. Rachel pulled out her phone and typed James Chicago into the search bar. The results made her blood run cold. James Blackwood, tech billionaire. Venture capitalist worth billions. One of the most powerful men in the city, and he'd spent the entire evening with her. Nobody graphic designer who couldn't even find the right table in a restaurant. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number? Sleep well, Rachel Montgomery. I'll be thinking of you. How did he get her number? How did he know her full name when she'd only said Rachel? She stood in her dark apartment, staring at the message, feeling excitement and fear twist together in her stomach. She'd stumbled into something far bigger than a simple dinner conversation. And despite every logical warning in her head, she couldn't wait to see what happened next. Morning after confusion, Rachel woke to sunlight streaming through her bedroom window and the persistent buzz of her phone. 17 missed calls from Natalie. She groaned, remembering she'd completely abandoned her friend at the restaurant last night before she could call back. Her apartment buzzer rang. Rachel stumbled to the intercom in her pajamas, expecting a package delivery. Instead, a courier stood holding an enormous bouquet of white roses. Delivery for Rachel Montgomery, the man announced cheerfully. Rachel signed for them in a daze. Carrying the crystal vase to her kitchen counter, the roses were perfect, each bloom flawless. Tucked among the stems was a small card with elegant handwriting. Thank you for the most honest conversation I've had in years, JB. Her phone rang. Natalie, where were you last night? Her friend demanded. I waited for an hour. The hostess said someone matching your description ran past her and sat at a completely different table. Rachel sank onto her couch, clutching the card. "Nat, I think I accidentally had dinner with James Blackwood." Silence. Then, the James Blackwood. The billionaire who owns half the tech startups in Chicago? "I didn't know who he was at the time," Rachel protested. "I just sat at the wrong table and he asked me to stay." "Rachel, people don't just have dinner with James Blackwood. He's notoriously private. There are entire articles about how he never dates publicly after some scandal with his ex-fiancée." Natalie paused. "Wait, did you say he asked you to stay? That doesn't sound like him at all." Rachel stared at the roses, remembering the intensity in his blue eyes. "There's something else. He knew where I lived without me telling him. And he texted me from a number I never gave him."
Ah!
"That's creepy, Rachel. That's actually really creepy." "I know," Rachel whispered. But even as she said it, she couldn't shake the memory of his smile. The way he'd listened to every word she said like it mattered. The company takeover Monday morning at work started normally. Rachel arrived at the small marketing firm where she'd worked for 3 years, coffee in hand, ready to tackle the new campaign. But the office buzzed with unusual energy. People clustered in nervous groups, whispering, "Did you hear?" Her coworker Thomas rushed over. "We got bought out over the weekend. Some huge investor purchased controlling interest in the company." Rachel's stomach dropped. "Who?" "Blackwood Ventures." Thomas pulled up the press release on his phone. "Effective immediately. James Blackwood is our primary stakeholder. There's a company meeting in 10 minutes. The conference room was packed. Their CEO, Mr. Harrison, stood at the front, looking uncomfortable. Beside him stood James, immaculate in a navy suit, scanning the room until his eyes landed on Rachel. He smiled. "I'll keep this brief," James began, his voice commanding instant attention. "Blackwood Ventures sees tremendous potential in this company. We're not here to dismantle what you've built. We're here to help it grow." His gaze never left Rachel. "In fact, I'd like to personally review some of your current projects, starting with the design team." After the meeting, Rachel tried to slip out quickly, but James's assistant intercepted her. "Mr. Blackwood would like to see you in his temporary office. 3rd floor, room 302. Rachel's hand shook as she climbed the stairs. This couldn't be coincidence. He'd bought her entire company. The confrontation. James stood by the window when she entered, hands in his pockets, looking out over the city. He turned as she closed the door. "You bought my company," Rachel said flatly. "In less than 48 hours since we met, you purchased the place where I work?" "Yes," James replied simply. "Why?" "This is insane. This is controlling and manipulative and completely unacceptable." James crossed the room until he stood close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and woodsy. "Because I couldn't stop thinking about you. Because I wanted to see you again and I didn't know if you'd answer if I called, so you bought my company." Rachel's voice rose. "Normal people send flowers or ask for coffee. They don't acquire someone's entire workplace." "I'm not normal people," James said quietly. "I haven't been normal since I made my first million at 23. Money changes what's possible, Rachel. It changes the rules." "Well, I don't want to play by your rules." Rachel grabbed the door handle. "This is too much, too fast to everything. I can't do this." "Wait." James caught her wrist gently. "Please, just let me explain. Let me take you to dinner tonight and I'll tell you everything. The truth about why I am the way I am." Rachel looked at his hand on her wrist, then up at his face. The confidence had cracked, revealing something vulnerable underneath. "One dinner," she said, "and then you need to back off." Dinner and revelations that evening, James picked her up personally, driving himself in a modest sedan rather than the chauffeured luxury car. They went to a small Italian restaurant in a quiet neighborhood, nothing fancy or expensive. "I grew up in Detroit," James began, once they'd ordered. "My father was an auto worker who lost his job when the factory started closing. We lived in a house with no heat some winters. My mother cleaned offices at night to keep food on the table." Rachel stayed quiet, letting him talk. "I watched my father drink himself into anger because he couldn't provide for us. Watched my mother's hands crack and bleed from industrial cleaners. I was 12 when I promised myself I'd never be powerless like that. Never be at someone else's mercy. James stared at his untouched wine. I taught myself to code using library computers. Built my first app at 16 and sold it for $50,000. By 18, I had investors interested. By 25, I'd made my first 100 million. But money didn't fix the fear, Rachel guessed. James looked up at her, and she saw real pain in his eyes. It just gave me new things to be afraid of. Like people who only see dollar signs when they look at me. Like Veronica, your ex-fiancée. Rachel said, remembering Natalie's mention of a scandal. James nodded. We dated for 2 years. She seemed different from everyone else. Genuine. I proposed on a beach in Santorini. Planned the wedding for the following spring. His jaw tightened. 3 weeks before the ceremony, I discovered she'd been working with my business rival, feeding him information about my deals. The entire relationship was a setup to get access to my company's secrets. Rachel felt her anger soften. James, that's awful. After that, I stopped trusting anyone. Built walls so high, nobody could climb them. He reached across the table, taking her hand. Until you crashed into my life, drank my wine, and talked to me like I was just another person having a bad day. But following me, buying my company, that's not healthy, Rachel said gently. That's not how you build trust. I know. James squeezed her hand. I'm sorry. I don't know how to do this normally. Every relationship I've had since Veronica has been calculated, controlled. But with you, I felt something real for the first time in 5 years and I panicked. I tried to control it the only way I know how. A choice to make, Rachel pulled her hand back slowly. I need time to think about this. What you did scares me, James. It makes me wonder what else you might do if things don't go your way. I understand, James said, though his expression showed how much the words hurt him. I'll give you space. No more surprise acquisitions or showing up uninvited. Just please don't completely close the door. They finished dinner in heavy silence. James drove her home, walking her to her building entrance. For what it's worth, he said softly, meeting you reminded me, there are things money can't buy or control, like genuine connection, like the way someone looks at you when they don't know your net worth. I'd give up everything I've built for more of that feeling. Rachel studied his face in the streetlight. Behind the expensive haircut and designer clothes was a lonely man who'd built a fortress around his heart and forgotten how to open the gates. Good night, James, she said finally. Rachel. She watched him drive away, then went upstairs to her apartment. Her phone buzzed immediately. Natalie. Well, how did it go? Rachel collapsed on her couch. He told me about his past. About growing up poor and his ex-fiancée betraying him, and I don't know, Nat. Part of me understands why he's so messed up about trust and control. But another part of me is terrified. What if I let him in and he tries to control every aspect of my life? What does your gut tell you? Rachel closed her eyes, remembering the vulnerability in James's voice when he'd talked about his childhood. The way his hand had trembled slightly when he'd held hers. My gut says he's broken, but not bad. That maybe he just needs someone willing to show him there's another way. Then trust your gut, Natalie advised. But be careful. Billionaires don't play by normal rules. The decision for 3 days, Rachel heard nothing from James. No flowers, no texts, no sudden appearances at her office. He'd kept his promise about space. And somehow that made her miss him more. She found herself thinking about him constantly, the way he'd smiled when she'd crashed his dinner, the honesty in his eyes when he'd shared his painful past, the fear he'd tried to hide when she'd asked for time. On Friday evening, Rachel made her decision. She texted the number he'd used before, meet me at Lincoln Park tomorrow, by the duck pond. RPM. His response came within seconds. I'll be there. The park meeting, James arrived exactly on time, dressed casually in jeans and a sweater. It was the first time Rachel had seen him in anything other than a suit. He looked younger, more approachable. They walked along the pond in silence for a few minutes before Rachel spoke. I've been thinking about what you said. About not knowing how to do relationships normally. Rachel, I meant what I said about giving you space. You don't have to let me finish, she interrupted gently. I've also been thinking about my own patterns. I've spent my whole life playing it safe, dating safe men, taking safe jobs, making safe choices, and I've been miserable. James stopped walking, turning to face her. What you did was wrong, Rachel continued. The investigating, the company purchase, all of it. But I understand why you did it. You're terrified of being hurt again, so you try to control everything. I get that. But if we're going to try this, you need to learn to let go of some of that control. And I need to learn to take risks. What are you saying? James's voice was barely above a whisper. I'm saying let's try. Really try. No more investigations or surprise business deals. Just two people getting to know each other honestly. James stepped closer, cupping her face gently in his hands. I promise. No more games. Just me and you. When he kissed her, soft and tentative like he was afraid she might disappear, Rachel felt something shift inside her chest. This was either the best decision she'd ever made or the biggest mistake. But for the first time in years, she was willing to find out. The shadow returned, so they spent the next 2 weeks in a bubble of happiness. James took her to art museums and tiny bookshops. They cooked dinner together in his penthouse, where Rachel discovered he made excellent pasta but terrible coffee. He taught her about venture capital, and she taught him about design theory. They talked for hours about everything and nothing. Rachel met his business partner, David, who pulled her aside at a company dinner and whispered, I haven't seen him this happy in years. Thank you, she introduced James to Natalie, who interrogated him thoroughly before declaring him acceptable. But I'm watching you. It felt perfect. Too perfect? The first sign of trouble came on a Wednesday morning. Rachel arrived at work to find a tabloid website open on Thomas's computer. The headline read, Blackwood's new toy? Who is Rachel Montgomery? The article was vicious, implying she was a gold digger who'd trapped Chicago's most eligible bachelor. It included photos of them together, their private moments captured by long range. Cameras. Rachel's phone exploded with calls from numbers she didn't recognize. Her social media filled with hateful messages from strangers. By lunch, she'd made all her accounts private, but the damage was done. James called immediately. I'm handling it. My lawyers are sending cease and desist letters to every publication that ran the story. How did they even get these photos? Rachel asked, staring at a picture of them kissing in the park. We were alone. Someone hired photographers to follow us. James's voice was tight with barely controlled anger. And I know exactly who. Veronica. This is her playbook. When she can't have something, she destroys it. Rachel felt cold dread settle in her stomach. James, what are we going to do? We fight back. Together, can you come to my office? We need to talk about this in person. The truth comes out. At James's office. Rachel found him pacing like a caged tiger. David was there too, looking grim. Veronica's been trying to sabotage my business deals for years, James explained. Small things, mostly. Spreading rumors, trying to turn investors against me. But this is different. This is personal. Why does she care who you date? Rachel asked. You broke up 5 years ago. David and James exchanged a look. There's more to the story, David said carefully. Tell her everything, James. She deserves to know what she's up against. James sat heavily in his chair. Veronica didn't just betray me for business reasons. She and my former partner, Gregory Walsh, had planned to marry me. Divorce me within a year and use the settlement to fund their own competing venture. They had lawyers lined up, contracts prepared. The whole thing was a con from the beginning. Rachel's hand flew to her mouth. That's horrible. When I discovered the truth and called off the wedding, I also exposed their scheme publicly. Gregory lost his reputation and his investors. Veronica lost her credibility in our social circle. They blamed me for ruining their lives, even though they'd tried to ruin mine first. And now, she's coming after me because I'm with you, Rachel said slowly. Yes, and it's only going to get worse. James looked at her with anguish in his eyes. Rachel, if you want to walk away, I understand. I never wanted to drag you into this mess. Rachel thought about the hateful messages on her phone, the way her coworkers had looked at her that morning with a mixture of pity and judgment. It would be so easy to walk away, to return to her safe, quiet life. But then she looked at James, really looked at him. Saw the man who'd opened up about his painful childhood, who'd tried so hard to change his controlling ways for her, who was now offering to let her go even though it was clearly killing him. "I'm not going anywhere," Rachel said firmly. "If Veronica wants a fight, she'll get one. But we do this together, on our terms. No more hiding, no more letting her control the narrative." James stood and pulled her into his arms. "Are you sure? This could get ugly, I'm sure." Rachel pulled back to look at him. "But we need a plan. A real one. Not you trying to control everything, but us working as a team." David cleared his throat. "I might have some ideas about that," the battle planned. David pulled up a presentation on the conference room screen. "Veronica's power comes from operating in shadows. She spreads rumors, plants stories, but never puts her name on anything. She's protected herself legally while destroying reputations. So we expose her," Rachel said. "Make her tactics public." "Exactly," David agreed. "But we need proof. We need to show a pattern of harassment that goes beyond jealousy." "James, you said she's targeted other women you've dated?" James nodded grimly. 3 others in the past 5 years. All relationships ended after Veronica's interference. Leaked photos, planted stories, threatening messages. I tried to shield them, but eventually they all decided I wasn't worth the trouble. "Can we contact them?" Rachel asked. "If they're willing to testify about what happened, we'd have a case for a restraining order at minimum." "It's risky," David warned. "Going public means everything comes out. Your relationship will be under a microscope. Every date, every argument, every moment will be analyzed by strangers." Rachel squeezed James's hand. "Let them look. We have nothing to hide." Over the next few days, David's legal team tracked down James's previous relationships. 2 women agreed to provide statements about Veronica's harassment. The third, a lawyer named Patricia Hammond, agreed to meet with Rachel personally. Meeting the past, Patricia invited Rachel to her downtown office, a corner suite with views of the Chicago River. She was elegant and composed, exactly the kind of woman Rachel had imagined James would date. "Thank you for seeing me," Rachel began. "I'm doing this for you, not for James," Patricia said bluntly. "He's a good man, but his baggage made our relationship impossible. You should know what you're getting into." Rachel sat straighter. "I'm listening." Veronica started with small things. Social media accounts impersonating me, saying horrible things. Then photos of me at work appeared on gossip sites with captions implying I was using James for career advancement. Patricia's professional mask cracked slightly. My firm's clients started asking questions. My reputation was damaged. I told James it was over because I couldn't handle the scrutiny. "Do you regret it?" Rachel asked. Patricia was quiet for a moment. "Yes and no. I wasn't strong enough to fight beside him, but I also realized I didn't love him enough to want to. The question is, do you?" Rachel thought about James teaching her to make his mother's pasta recipe, laughing when they'd burned the garlic. The way he'd held her during a thunderstorm when she'd admitted she was afraid of lightning. How he'd listened for hours while she'd talked about her dreams of opening her own design studio. "Yes," Rachel said simply. "I do." Patricia nodded, respect showing in her eyes. "Then take this." She handed over a thick folder. "Every message, every fake account, every planted story from my time with James, it's all documented. Use it to stop her before she destroys another relationship." The public stand armed with evidence from 3 women and David's legal expertise. They prepared their countermove. But before they could file anything, the situation escalated. Rachel arrived home on a rainy Tuesday evening to find her apartment door slightly open. Her heart hammered as she pushed it wider. The place had been ransacked. Furniture overturned, clothes scattered. Her laptop smashed on the floor. On the wall above her couch, written in red lipstick, was a message: "Stay away from what's mine, or next time will be worse." Rachel called James with shaking hands. He arrived within minutes, David and a security team behind him. While they documented everything for the police report, James pulled Rachel into the kitchen, away from the chaos. "You're staying with me tonight? And every night until this is resolved." His voice left no room for argument. For once, Rachel didn't protest his need to protect. She was genuinely frightened now. This wasn't just gossip anymore. Veronica had crossed into criminal territory. "We need to end this," Rachel said. "Tomorrow, we go public with everything." James scheduled a press conference at his company headquarters the next morning. News crews filled the lobby, cameras pointing at the podium where he stood with Rachel beside him. Rachel had never been more nervous. She wore a simple blue dress, her hair pulled back, looking professional and composed even though her stomach churned. "Thank you all for coming," James began. "I've called this conference to address the recent media attention surrounding my personal life, and to make a formal statement about harassment that has continued for 5 years." He outlined everything: his relationship with Veronica and its painful end, the pattern of harassment against women he'd dated since, the evidence they'd gathered from multiple victims, the break-in at Rachel's apartment. "This isn't about protecting my reputation or my relationship," James said, his voice steady but passionate. "This is about stopping someone who has weaponized gossip and intimidation to control other people's lives." Veronica Ashford has hired investigators, paid photographers, created fake social media accounts, and now escalated to property destruction and threats. Rachel stepped forward to the microphone. "I'm not a gold digger. I'm not using James for money or status. I'm a graphic designer who accidentally sat at the wrong table in a restaurant and met someone who made me laugh. Someone who listens when I talk and remembers small details about my life. Someone I love." Her voice strengthened. "I'm here because no one should have to choose between love and safety. Because relationships shouldn't come with the price tag of harassment and intimidation. And because I'm tired of hiding something good because someone else can't let go of the past." The questions from reporters came fast and harsh, but James and Rachel answered them together, a united front. Veronica's response: Veronica held her own press conference that afternoon, playing the victim perfectly. She claimed James had manipulated multiple women, that she was simply trying to warn Rachel away from a dangerous man. She produced edited text messages and selectively cropped emails that seemed to support her story. The public was divided. Social media exploded with debates. #Team James and #Team Veronica trended for days. Rachel's face was everywhere, analyzed and judged by millions of strangers. The worst part was the doubt. Even with all their evidence, some people believed Veronica's version. Rachel received death threats alongside messages of support. She had to delete all her social media and change her phone number. "Maybe this was a mistake," she told James one night, crying in his penthouse while rain hammered the windows. "Maybe we should have just kept quiet." "No," James held her tightly. "Silence is what she wants. Silence is what let her hurt so many people. We did the right thing, Rachel. Even if it's hard." The legal battle David's legal team filed for a restraining order, citing the break-in, the harassment pattern, and threatening messages. Veronica's lawyers fought back hard, claiming James was using his wealth and influence to silence a woman telling the truth. The hearing was brutal. Veronica played up her role as the scorned woman, crying on the stand while describing how James had ruined her life by calling off their wedding. Her lawyers painted James as controlling and vindictive, someone who couldn't handle rejection. But then Patricia took the stand. Cool and professional, she described her own experience with Veronica's harassment in clinical detail. The fake accounts, the planted stories, the threats. "I'm a successful attorney," Patricia said firmly. "I have my own money, my own career, my own life. I had nothing to gain from James Blackwood except companionship. But Veronica Ashford made that impossible. She tried to destroy my reputation simply because I dated someone she considered her property." The second woman testified to similar experiences. Then David presented phone records showing Veronica had hired the same private investigation firm to follow all 3 women, the same photographers to capture compromising images. Finally, they played security footage from Rachel's apartment building. A woman matching Veronica's description entering Rachel's floor the evening of the break-in. Her face wasn't completely visible, but the figure, the clothing, the timeline all matched. Veronica's composure cracked. Her lawyers scrambled to explain. But the evidence was overwhelming. The judge granted a temporary restraining order and scheduled a criminal hearing for the break-in. Veronica fled the courthouse surrounded by her legal team, refusing to comment. Aftermath and healing, the news cycle moved on eventually, as it always does. New scandals replaced theirs. The restraining order was made permanent. Veronica was charged with criminal trespass and harassment. She settled out of court, agreeing to stay away from James, Rachel, and anyone else in their orbit permanently. But the damage took time to heal. Rachel had nightmares about finding her apartment destroyed. She jumped at unexpected noises and checked over her shoulder constantly. James struggled with guilt, convinced he'd brought all this pain into her life. "You'd be safe and happy if you'd never met me," he said one evening. "I'd be safe and bored," Rachel corrected. "James, I don't regret this. Any of it. Yes, it was scary and horrible, but we survived it together. That means something." They started therapy, both individually and as a couple, learning to process the trauma and build healthier patterns. James worked on his need for control, accepting that some things couldn't be fixed or prevented. Rachel worked on setting boundaries and speaking up when things bothered her, instead of letting them build. 3 months after the hearing, Rachel's design studio opened, a small space in a trendy neighborhood. Funded partially by her savings and partially by an investment from Blackwood Ventures on strictly professional terms. Negotiated by lawyers neither of them knew personally. "I want this to be mine," Rachel had insisted. "My success, my risk, my work, not because I'm dating you." "I know," James had agreed. "That's why I'm investing. Because you're brilliant at what you do, and it's a smart business decision. If we weren't dating, I'd still want in on this company." The studio thrived. Within 6 months, Rachel had 3 employees and a client list that included several major brands. She was featured in design magazines, interviewed on podcasts, building a reputation entirely separate from her relationship with James, the proposal a year after they'd met. James took Rachel back to the restaurant where they'd first encountered each other. He'd reserved the same table by the window where she'd accidentally sat down and changed both their lives. "I've been thinking about that night," James said as they finished dessert. "About how you crashed into my life when I'd completely given up on genuine connection. You reminded me what it feels like to be seen as a person instead of a bank account. You reminded me what it feels like to take risks," Rachel replied. "To be brave enough to want something even when it's complicated and scary." James reached across the table, taking her hand. "I know I'm not easy to love. I'm controlling and paranoid, and I have more baggage than any person should have to carry. But you've helped me become someone better. Someone who trusts again. Someone who believes in partnership instead of control." He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket and opened it. Inside was a simple platinum band with a single diamond, elegant and understated. "Rachel Montgomery, will you marry me?" Rachel felt tears streaming down her face. She thought about everything they'd been through. The harassment, the public scrutiny, the fear and doubt. But she also thought about the quiet moments. Making pasta together. Reading beside each other on Sunday mornings. The way he'd learned to ask instead of demand. The way she'd learned to stand her ground. "Yes," she said. "Absolutely yes." James slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her across the table while the entire restaurant applauded. Rachel laughed through her tears, realizing the hostess must have tipped off the other diners. "You planned this," she accused playfully. "I learned from the best," James grinned. "Sometimes the best moments come from a little chaos and a lot of heart." The beginning of forever 6 months later, they married in a small ceremony at a botanical garden. No press, no cameras, except their chosen photographer. Just 50 close friends and family watching them promise forever. Natalie was maid of honor, still slightly suspicious of James, but admitting he'd proven himself. David was best man, giving a toast about how he'd never seen his friend so happy or so human. James's mother pulled Rachel aside before the ceremony. "Thank you for loving my son," she said softly. "For seeing past the walls he built and finding the good man underneath, for being strong enough to stand beside him when it would have been easier to run. "Thank you for raising someone capable of change," Rachel replied, "for teaching him that vulnerability isn't weakness." As Rachel walked down the aisle toward James, she thought about the impossible chain of events that had brought them together. A mixed-up reservation, a wrong table, a chance encounter that had spiraled into love. Chaos, public scrutiny, legal battles, and finally this moment of peace. James's eyes were wet as she reached him. He took her hands and whispered, "Thank you for staying.